There we go. So it's recording now. If you have any questions, throw them into the chat. Yeah, I'll try to ignore the chat a little bit because I get distracted with it pretty easily. And then when if you have a question, it'll be there. I'll get to answering questions at the end. If I spot a question that makes sense to answer at the time, I definitely will. So we'll get started here. You might have seen me post this today. I just did, but if not, I'll pull it up here. Yeah, so here's my ephemeris, my GAN ephemeris. Let's get started with actually a simpler one too. Let's pull up this here, and I've got my blank. All right, so I'll get you all of these files, all these links. Now, you might do this stuff already on your own. If you're already doing any form of astrology, this might be rather simple for you. What you're seeing on the screen is really simplistic. It's just your standard ephemeris. It's your standard 360-degree scale on a circle. It's also got the dates of the year set to 0 degrees at March 21st, going down to June. This is just your standard astro ephemeris with the names of the astrological signs around there. Okay. And this is going to be my focus today. Even though we're going to be working with natal planets, I'm not going to focus on a natal chart reading. We're going to focus on the planetary positioning. You might have seen me do this before at some free webinars previously. If you know me, this is going to be, maybe some of it's going to be a repeat, but the way I'm going to handle it's going to be completely new and different. You'll see how you could do it on your own without Optima, and then we'll move right into Optima just to sort of go a little faster through, the simple examples. So here I've got just this AstroSeek website. I mean, there's probably 100 good ephemeris online. I've used this one before. I like the detail. It's a weird site. It's got lots of ads. I'm using Brave right now. It blocks ads. It's usually a good idea with this kind of stuff. It just becomes, these websites are all messy with ads. So, basically, I'm going to use the simplistic astro information that you could get from here, but actually you can get quite sophisticated with this stuff. You can actually create natal transit searches. But the ability to find a planetary position on any particular date in time goes back to 1800 here. I have dates that I use that go back to 1792. If you know the Buttonwood Agreement, that's a common name or a common date. So, I'll show some stuff with that date in Optima. You can't go back that far with this, but there's other ephemeris out there, if throw your favorite one in the chat room if you like yours, so other people can know about it. There's basically, I just wanted to go with the most basic example. And you're going to see that in a sense, the ephemeris in Optima is quite basic from a astrological point of view. From a natal chart reading, the actual elements aren't quite advanced. They're simplistic, but they are particular. Being able to lay these scales in the way that you see them, this kind of thing, it really is particular to GAN trading. So GAN was using astrology, there's no question, but how he used it might have been, when it came down to trading, a little bit less than familiar to a classic astrologer. So let's take a look here. What I was doing here is I was looking at the first day of Apple trading here in 1980. So their first trade date was 12/12/1980. And so you can find this kind of information anywhere. And this is where I begin. Well, when I say anywhere, on the internet, lots of places. This is probably available on the Apple Wikipedia or just in Google if you search Apple first trade, the date of the IPO, if you have a good data system, maybe, I'm not sure how far back TradingView goes. We'll take a look. But basically, these kinds of things like natal dates, if you have trouble finding this kind of information, let me know. What a natal date is, it's usually a first trade date. It's usually the date the actual market began. Sometimes you might want to use something a little bit more, I guess you could call it, well, let's just esoteric, that kind of thing. Using something like the Buttonwood Agreement, which was, let's call it the esoteric beginning of the New York Stock Exchange. It's just sort of a weird date that people pull out of history that happens to resonate heavily with the markets. The date itself, you could look look these things up and get that stuff for yourself. I don't want to get too deep into the meanings, the rabbit holes of GAN. That's what I try to avoid with my students, because I think that you guys will notice immediately is I'm going to jump right into trading. And, a lot of people will talk a lot about translating GAN books to you. And, recently I've been hearing from students basically that that's refreshing to them, and I'll stick with it because, there's other people out there that are interpreting GAN for you, but how to put them into place, how to get them onto a chart, how to, simply base a trade off of these things. How it seems like that's where people don't go. And I'd really like to reveal that for you. That's basically what these webinars are about. The last webinar being quite revealing in the end. You'll see if you're a part of that one. So to start off with, again, I started with Apple's first trade day. Could choose any company. I'll show you a bunch of different ones. We start with Apple. There's a reason I'm familiar with it, and also it trades within a nice comfortable range so that we can do some simplistic math to begin with. But again, this is the kind of thing you can do with any chart, okay? So what we did here is we took the actual position of Jupiter and I plotted it on my 360-degree circle. Now, if you don't know anything about astrology and you've never seen anything like this before, I do encourage you beyond this point. I think that, just reading up on stuff, Googling stuff like how to read an ephemeris is going to help you. I don't know how basic I could really get here, but essentially you've got planetary positions. Now, planetary positions, these degrees, these represent an actual position in the planetary orbit. Now, these are geocentric positions, meaning they are a position that also relates to the planet's orbit from the perspective of a position on Earth. Now, that might be a little bit more complicated. So there's two forms of planetary positions. There's heliocentric and geocentric. We use both of them. They're both valid. I'll go through some setups of what they look like a little bit more clearly beyond this point. But if you don't know what a planetary position is, basically it's just a point in the orbit of a planet. And you know that the planets go around the sun, while going around the sun in a circle of 360 degrees. And we mark the position of the Earth on March 21st as 0 degrees. In a sense, it's the position of the sun in the sky, but truly it's the position of Earth around the sun. This stuff gets a little bit funny. The science of the planets, the science of geometry, the orbits. I've got a good graph that shows you all the different times of the orbits, and I'll give you that. We'll take a look at that too. But I just want you to know that there is a simplistic thing going on here with an ephemeris. Actually, maybe I should just take a look quickly at this ephemeris. This ephemeris here, I can show somewhat a real looking, let's see here, real, yeah, the real position, maybe real log, yeah, okay. So basically, this is somewhat the real position of the planets. If I put them to heliocentric, the sun is in the center, and the planets go around the sun. And if I put this time, it's set right now to 12/12/1980. But if I start to slide the time into the future here, you'll see the planets move and they go around. Now, let's see here. There we go. They go around the sun. Okay. And then if we put the Earth in the center instead, that's the geocentric positions. They're slightly different. The outer planets' positions are quite a lot more similar, let's say, than to their actual geocentric position than the smaller, faster planets, the inner planets. But from the Earth's perspective, this is the geocentric position of the planet. It's a degree still. It's the same plotting in the sense on the circle, not the same position as the geocentric, but the same way that it is plotted. And these are the actual positions of the planets. But when we look at an ephemeris like Gann did, we would take away this stacked approach, and we would put them all on the outside ring like a clock. Okay, so we would move all of the planets to the outer rings. And that becomes like a sort of a virtual look at the sky. It's not really the way the planets sit. They don't sit all together on one ring. They're all different orbits, and their sizes also determine, how long it takes them to go around at the speed that they move. So when we push them all to the outer ring, if I push them back out to the outer ring here, this gives us a sort of relativeness. It allows us to see each planet move in its full 360-degree cycle. I guess my 0 degrees is there. Anyway, we'll work on that. But basically, just knowing that the planets are going around this circle, and they're all going at a different speed, but they are all going around this one ring together. And they'll all go around this ring and hit these specific points at different times, at the time that they would hit it in their own cycle. But we could see them against each other this way. We can see Mercury going very fast compared to all the rest of the planets. And we can see, the outer planets like Pluto and Neptune moving very slowly. And as soon as we do it this way, we can see not only the planetary position in that classic way where you see the planetary sign with the planetary degree at like 21 degrees Libra, as you see up there on screen with Saturn position there. But also you're seeing it against the position of, say, Jupiter or Pluto. A direct connection to the degrees, visually. We don't have to sort of draw a line or anything like that. And this becomes important because, understanding that the planetary orbits are being compared in some sense is what an ephemeris is showing us. And for Gann trading, that's so important. It's the relationships of the planets to each other and to particular positions in the past that we're paying attention to. So to see them all on a circle together is the way we need to do it. Okay. Yes, we need to do maybe other forms of astrology and read, a natal chart. We could put a separate ring on the inside and set a natal date. But just this, what you're seeing me do right here, is now exactly what I'm going to do by hand on this ephemeris here. So let's pull up that ephemeris. I've got my actual position of natal Jupiter on this 12/12 date in 1980, drawn on the outer ring of my ephemeris. Okay, 187 degrees geocentric. Now let's pull up this astro ephemeris. There we go. Oops. Bear with me, I've got lots of windows open. Make sure it's nice and clear for you. All right. So if you go to this AstroSeek page, again, you can use any page, but we just go to the ephemeris tables, and you can pull up a particular date. Down here are all the dates stacked. Start at 1980, it's the natal date of Apple. And we'll move to December. And let's change this for now to ABS degrees, which is just going to give us the planetary degree rather than the name of the planetary sign and its position within that planetary sign. You can see that I've got that written there on my ephemeris because, in a sense, sometimes it becomes important, especially if you're doing it manually. You'll see that even with this software that I'm using on this free website, it gets a little inconsistent, and you can't enter degrees when you're doing a certain kind of searching for particular, searching for planetary degrees a particular way. So here we go. We're looking at the 12th of December of 1980, and we'll look over to Jupiter, 187 degrees. There it is. Okay. And so I just take that number, I plop it down. Once I put it down on, it's there forever. This is the position of natal Jupiter forever on this contract. And you'll see that 187 degrees in time and in price in many different ways is going to become very important for a stock like Apple. And that doesn't mean that it's always going to be a high or a low. It's not about that truly. There's all kinds of little things that go along with it, and that's why eventually we get into the more advanced stuff, in the next following weeks. But in the simplest way, yes, this position, 187 degrees of natal Jupiter, is a common place to look for change in trend. When any other planet crosses that spot, when any other planet crosses, makes an angular relationship to that spot on the ephemeris, like maybe 72 degrees, as I show you up here. So basically, what you've got up on the screen is the position of Jupiter, and then I'm just showing the quintiles, and I'm focusing on this natal Jupiter quintiles chart because I think that if you really want to get down to it, it's the most important cycle that you need to watch for any market. I know that's a little strange if you are into astrology already, or you were maybe told that there were certain sectors that are covered by certain planets. And don't get me wrong, it probably is a good way to approach things sometimes. If you're lacking information, go with somebody's approach, try it out. If they've tested a market with certain planets, go ahead with it. Try it out. Try it out in this way that I'm doing, or with some astro software, lay out those cycles that you've read about. But try the Jupiter natal cycle. And when we say Jupiter natal cycle, we mean as the first trade comes in and time starts to pass, we're going to watch for any planet to make a relationship to Jupiter's natal position, just like I said. But in the most easy way, I guess, best way to put it, we can look at the sun's position versus these natal positions of Jupiter, because we've already got our yearly calendar on our circle as well. Okay, so yes, we've got the planetary signs. Yes, we've got the planetary degrees, but we've also got dates. Now, those dates can only really be used with the sun. Now, yes, they are degrees, technically. Each day of the year is somewhat 1 degree of the year, not quite, but you see that these dates really, in some sense, are arbitrary for any other planet. It doesn't matter. It's not like if Jupiter was on this part of the ephemeris, that means that it's June 7th or January 7th there. It doesn't mean anything like that, It only can refer to the sun. So in some sense, we only look at that ring for the sun, okay? At least from my point of view. So right now, up on the screen, without doing anything more than plotting 187 degrees, we've got a date here, also in the year. So that's a position of Jupiter, 187 degrees, but also a date of the year, which is just after 187, just after 180 degrees of the year, which is the September equinox. You're dealing with, I guess, September 27th, September 28th. Actually, more like, sorry, I've got the date there written. September 30th, more like September 30th or October 1st. Okay. So if I'm off by a couple degrees here and there, bear with me. The exactness of this isn't important. But if 180 degrees is September 21st, September 22nd, then you're dealing with just after that period of time there. And that's the position of the sun at 187 degrees. And that becomes an important date for Apple every year. Okay, we'll look for maybe changes in trend at that time, or a balancing of the market in a particular way at that period of time. But essentially, you're dealing with two things on this chart: the position of Jupiter, and in a sense, also then the position of the sun on the day that it might hit 187 degrees. And then I've also got the quintile. So I've just taken this number 187 and I've multiplied, I've added 72 degrees to 187 degrees until I've come back around to 187, okay? So if I split a 360-degree circle into 72-degree segments, it gives me the fifths of the circle. It gives me 5 parts, 5 equal parts. And that creates this form of geometry that you see. If I were to connect it this way, you could see, I mean, the star is arbitrary in a sense. These are actually 144-degree connections between these points. That's somewhat important, but generally it's 72 degrees between each one of these points on the outer ring, okay? And somebody's asking, is Jupiter always what we select? I mean, like I said, Jupiter, definitely. I don't know if you asked that question before I did my explanation, but generally, yes, Jupiter is where you begin. Began with Mars and Jupiter. You see the most evidence of his use of Mars and Jupiter personally. When you look back in the most obvious ways, there's definitely references to other planets, and there's no question. But when we begin with Mars and Jupiter, especially for somebody that looks at daily charts, and especially for somebody who's looking for those swings, those regular swings that we call maybe, Gann swing trading, those are going to be very nicely timed to not only the Mars cycle, but also the Jupiter cycle, as in either the positions of natal Jupiter, as in the position on the first day of the trading of Jupiter, or also of Mars. You can start with those 2 planets, I suppose. But yeah, I would start with Jupiter, because Jupiter is sort of the expansion planet. If you want to get a little bit into the classical reason why we would use Jupiter, it's the king of things growing. And that's why we want to see when money is going to grow. We're going to use Jupiter. And Mars is sort of like an energy planet. I mean, you can look at it in many different ways, but Mars is one of those things that gives things, it amplifies energy. And if you're going to amplify the energy of growth of money, well, that just is something just so natural about that. And yes, that is just a simplistic view, but I'll show you evidence that, yeah, the Jupiter cycle is the one you look for when you're looking for a new form of expansion to occur in a market. You look for the time when Jupiter makes a full cycle and comes back around to its natal position of 187 degrees, or on any other market where, wherever Jupiter was, okay? And I just jotted this stuff down quickly. This is really easy to do with this ephemeris. You pop in the date. That's the only number you need, 187, and you get all these other numbers. Let's talk a little bit about these other numbers now. We're not just dealing with a circle, in a sense, because again, we're going to take this and we're going to chart with it. The circles are charts, and charts can be charted on a circle, or they can be charted linearly. Oh boy. Let me have a sip of water here. So when we're using the circle, we have to see the linear scales in there as well, okay? And that's why I've got all these different numbers jotted here. So yes, it's 187 natal Jupiter. It's also 7 degrees Libra, okay, or Libra, however you would say it. Now, 187 degrees is also about 51% of 360 degrees. Let's take our calculator. I know it's simplistic, but sometimes it's nice to see. Okay, 187 divided by 360. About 51, maybe 52%. Okay, so this number is not only a degree, it's also percentage. So this number is, whoops, well, that's not handy. Oh, there we go. All right, little zoom action there. This number is not only natal Jupiter, 187 degrees, it's also the position of the sun on about October 1st, and it's also 51% of the length of the year, okay? And it's also 0% of the natal Jupiter cycle, technically. 0 degrees of the natal cycle, 0% of the natal cycle. And all those numbers will become important to those dates, okay? The date is really, again, only important for the sun, but the fact that it's also a percentage, not only is it a percentage of its own cycle, okay, but it's also a percentage of the actual cycle of the, I suppose in the sense if we're looking at it from the yearly cycle of the sun, 0 degrees, March 21st, it's one full cycle. It's 50% of the year as well, let's say. Okay. So we've got to just keep an eye on that kind of thing, because when we start to chart and you start to see these numbers play out all the time, there might be a reason why things move to 50%. Well, if 180 degrees is 50%, and 180 degrees astrologically is an opposition, and an opposition is technically a pretty an important point in a cycle of an astrological cycle. It's just the kind of thing where these types of connections are going to constantly play out on the market. You're going to be measuring things with percentage tools, but technically it could be because of a position of a planet in a circle and its percentage of that cycle. So once we start laying this stuff into TradingView, you'll see what I mean. But let's take a look here. Just a simple example would move to the next one. So 72 degrees from 187 degrees, 259 degrees. Okay, it's 19 degrees Sagittarius. It's also about December 11th or 12th. Okay, that is also 20% of the Jupiter cycle, as in 1/5 of the Jupiter cycle. Okay, and it's 71% of the year. Okay, so when we get to 259 degrees of the year, meaning December 11th, we are 71 degrees of the full 360 degree circle, which ends on March 21st. We're 71% through that cycle. Okay, so it's two things. It's not just its own position, its own cycle, but it's in a position of the year. And when we start laying these things against price, you'll see how this becomes even more important. So again, we'll just move on to the next one, 72 degrees from there. You're dealing with 91% of the cycle of the year, because this is about 330 degrees, 331 degrees, 1 degrees Pisces. Okay, it's the 144th degree of the cycle. It's the 40th percent of the cycle, 2/5. And it is 91% of the year, like I said. So if these numbers are planetary positions, they are part of the year, then how do we deal with price? And the arbitrary $1 per degree, $1 per day, $1 per week, $1 per month, $1 per any time unit. Our standard Gann, what he gave us, this sort of master chart that he gave us where we compare these numbers, these standard numbers, to set periods of time, and we make squares out of them. Okay, I'll show you what we mean by that. So we're going to take this circle, and not only then is this 187 degrees, then in one cycle of $360, where $1 is equal to 1 degree, $360 is one full cycle. 187 degrees is actually also $187. And that means that natal position of natal Jupiter is not only, in time, but it's also a price. Okay. And so I'll show you how to draw this into TradingView now. And the idea is that all of these numbers that I've got written up here are just going to be plugged into our tools And we're going to get these positions as time and price on the screen. The price, again, will be sitting at a ratio, though, of $1 per degree. Now, hopefully that's simple enough once we get looking at it, okay? But we're going to come back to this chart here, this ephemeris chart, soon too, because when we're plotting the dates, we can use the sun, right? But if we want to know when is Jupiter going to be 72 degrees from its natal position of 187 degrees, any time in the future, or if we're looking at the past, we want to look at the past, we need to look at the ephemeris from a different angle. We need to search for every time Jupiter was at 19 degrees Sagittarius in this sense, in this case for the 72 degree transit, okay, the quintile transit. So you've got your 19 degrees Sagittarius. You go into your ephemeris and say, okay, when are all the times that Jupiter hit 19 degrees Sagittarius? We can't just say, oh, it's going to be on December 12th, because that's not the way that works. That's not what this scale is telling us. 19 degrees Sagittarius is going to be a long period of time between when it was at 187, which is 7 degrees Libra. The entire Jupiter cycle is about 12 years. Okay, so if you're 1/5 of that cycle, or 2/5 or 3/5, you're dealing with long periods of time. Okay, we don't need to be specific right now. It's easier to just plop it into the chart. Plug it into the chart and you'll be able to see it. And I'm basically going to show you how to take this rudimentary information right now and plug it into a chart. I'm going to show you how to do it in TradingView. So basically anybody can do it. And then I'll do some more advanced stuff in Optima. So let me know if I'm going too fast, if anything's not making sense. But also, we can save some of the more interesting questions for the end. So I'm just pulling up here. Where's my TradingView chart here? Yeah, there it is. Okay, so a little complicated. What's up on the? Yeah, this is a little too complicated right now. I'm just going to knock it all back. If you don't use TradingView, it's pretty handy for this kind of stuff. It's got some decent GAN tools. Nothing more than that, really. I'm going to say about it. Actually, let's. I'll select all of these. I'll put them in their own group. I'm going to give you this file. You can check it out at the end in your own TradingView account, or even a free TradingView account will allow you to import just one chart. This will be enough, at least for today, to check that out. I'm going to put them into a group here, and I'm going to call this my 50 cents group. Now, we're going to talk about that, okay? But for now, we're going to work on something new. Get this out of the way. This is my Apple chart, plain old Apple chart. Let's see how far back our TradingView data goes. See what date they give us as the start. Let's hit auto. Okay, let's see here. Okay, well, there's your December-ish 1980, right? December 15th they have. Definitely, if you look it up, it's December 12th, okay? But that's a good, that's a pretty good amount of data. But you can see how this first bit of data is pretty scattered. It's pretty challenging to get full data sometimes, that's for sure. If you've ever tried to get historical data, ask me, I can help you get data, okay? I mean, there's free data out there, you just have to kind of know where it is, okay? And if you're using a charting software like TradingView, there's quite a bit of data in there. If you're using Optima, I can share many different ways of getting TradingView data into Optima, or also some special historical data. Okay. So now that we've got an Apple chart, now let's pull up actually, let's get our ephemeris up here. Just like this. And let's take our current market action. Let's get up there. Because, we're dealing with the modern time. Yeah, that's a great thing from 1980. Wow, okay, great. But let's move into the modern times. Now, like I said, immediately when you're starting to deal with this stuff, especially with the planets specifically, you know, you're going to deal with this ratio issue. I've already gotten a question today, somebody that's here in the webinar with us. The question comes up every time, what ratio do we use? And that's sort of a specialty of mine. You're going to go through it with me these next 3 weeks if you're in these webinars with us. Volume is going to be a big focus. Today, we're just going to look at $1 per degree, and then I'll switch over to 50 cents per degree just so you could see the difference. And if this still isn't clicking, you know, tomorrow we're still going to be working with simplistic stuff and we're going to be reinforcing these same ideas. So maybe it'll click then and on the rewatch, okay? And get the videos. So let's take just a horizontal line and I'm going to put down 360 degrees. I like to mark that off for myself. 360 degrees, $1 per degree, $360, arbitrary, simplistic. Now, in this case, we're going to start with charting the sun. Simpler, we don't have to figure out too much more than just the date of the natal Jupiter from our ephemeris. And then we can plot everything else that you see here very simplistically, easily to get these, easy to get all the numbers that you see up here just from this one date and this number. Okay, but then we'll move to getting the actual position of natal Jupiter and see what that brings us, okay? Sorry, the actual position of transiting Jupiter to natal Jupiter. So we'll look not just at the sun's position passing these particular points, but then we'll look at a longer term chart and see what it looks like when Jupiter is passing these points, okay? But to begin with, the sun needs to be plotted on the chart. And I know that means maybe sounds weird, but the sun is actually the simplest thing to chart. Let's also get a 0 degree line. Okay, real easy, just easy to see, makes it visual. Okay, and now I'm going to plot also a vertical line. It's the easiest thing ever to plot the sun. You just plot it at March 21st. Okay, get that out of the way. Be precise with it, but realize that because you're dealing here with planetary degrees laid over daily bars, it's never going to be perfect. Your angles, your straight lines are never going to be perfect. You're dealing with something that you might have to tweak over time, but this is it's gonna work for you quite well immediately, especially the sun. Okay, now, if you took my sun webinar, this is nothing new to you. So let's get another line here, March 21st. Few March 21sts. So that's 19. So March. Oh, okay. Okay. We have gone in time here. I guess I had these on the other layer. Oh well. I'm sure you guys can bear with me. We've got lots of time. I like it to be precise, March 21st. Sometimes it falls on the weekend, just choose March 21st, March 22nd, whatever's closest. I like to actually choose the day before. It doesn't matter, doesn't matter. Okay, we're dealing with something longer term here, something a little wider angle right now. You want to get that precise here, you might want to start dealing with the moon. Oh, okay, I don't want to be doing that. So let's pull this up to March 21st. I'll do a couple. That's all we need. Oh. There we go. Okay, 20. Okay, guys. So now that we have that down, really easy. Each stack of 360 degrees is a new cycle of 360 degrees of price, as we cross 360 degrees in price here, it's as if we were at 0 degrees again, and we've got a new layer of 360 degrees of price. Hopefully that makes sense. That's how we deal with price on a circle. How does this always, okay, if this price isn't 360 degrees or within 360 degrees, like it's right now, it's at 500, right? Apple was an easier example before it jumped over, okay? But you know, the SPY, that kind of stuff all sits within the first 360 degrees. That doesn't mean that it's the only ratio you're going to use for this market. No questions asked, you're going to use multiple ratios when you get into this. But, you know, quite simply, $1 per degree, you know, it's gonna show you quite often, at least, some of the bigger structures of you know, a lot of these stocks that sit within this range. Okay, so let's take a straight line, just a straight trend line, drawing it from 0 degrees up to 360 degrees, and we're going to cross on the same days, right? March 21st. Let's just set it manually. 0, 360, right? And, well, it's about right. March 21st, March 20th. Okay, it's the same as those lines there. And you'll see that eventually it might go off because, you know, again, the difference of trading days, these are plotted to trading days. But you could take this line. I like to make the actual sun line. I mean, this is the actual sun line. Okay, this is the sun's position from $0 to $360 in 1 year, moving at $1 per degree. So, I mean, it's pretty, I mean, this could be pretty revealing for people. I'm kind of jumping right through it, but I mean, this is, if you took the sun webinar, this is nothing to you because you know how complex this can get with your sun now, even just alone. But generally, you know, just that alone is pretty interesting to see. And I guess in general, if you realize that this might be something that, you know, might have at 50 cents per degree, a different angle, half of that angle, right? Pulling it just, you know, double the amount of time. Well, at 50 cents, this is now a 50 cents per degree line, and putting that at March 21st, and you get that kind of angular relationship in the past. I think you're realizing that generally, previously, the market was moving at a different relationship to the degrees of the sun or any planetary degree, okay, than right now, possibly moving at $1 per degree now. But in the past, it looks too flat, right? Like you need to get much more information, much more detail. And what that means is you just need to get right in there and shrink in with your ratio. Now, I use volume to help me determine a lot of this kind of stuff, but that gets pretty advanced. Okay, we'll get into that. So we're starting with $1 per degree. Let's get rid of that one, that 50-cent one. Already got that built. But if you can see that, you know, the fact that the high came in here quite basically on the sun, you know, that angle is reapproached. When we start dividing this stuff up, you'll see some other important connections. But remember, we're not dealing with just the sun. We're dealing with natal Jupiter. And we've got this manual setup here for ourselves. So let's draw the sun a little more. Let's draw the previous year's sun. So that's, again, the sun starting at 0 degrees of the year and coming up to 360 degrees. So you notice that, right? It jumps up and it continues up the scale. Or if you really want to, you know, look at the way it's actually being plotted, is it's moving up from 0 degrees to 360 degrees, and then it's starting again down here at 0 degrees. Sort of this is a vision or a virtual image of the sky of a full year, and this is the sun moving across that sky. Okay, it's a little bit, maybe a little too esoteric for some people, but generally that, you know, just the timing of it, it's just kind of like $1 per day, kind of, right? Close, anyways. So let's get this. Let's make these thicker, because we're going to have to add some extra information in there. So we've got basically, you know, the sun's position. We've got parts of the year that are labeled basically the 0 degrees of the year for ourselves. So, you know, hopefully you're already realizing that I've got the actual circle being drawn here. I've got my position of the sun crossing 0 degrees and then passing up through this 360 degree cycle back to 0 degrees or 360 degrees at the top here. So from 0 to 360, it looks like this, the sun going all the way around the circle. And as it passes these points, it also passes these points in price. Okay, so let's point out to ourselves all these points on the chart, just like we've pointed out the sun's position, the sun's position, which is technically, just the passing year, starting at 0 degrees being March 21st. That's very, astrology related. It's starting at January 1st, right? So starting at 0 degrees, popping the sun up to the top there, that's relevant just for the sun. But at 187 degrees is where the first natal Jupiter position in time begins, right? So every point of this year, we want to point to ourselves, at what point does the sun cross these positions of natal Jupiter, the quintile positions? Obviously at 0 degrees, crossing 0 degrees, it's already crossing, well into the Jupiter cycle. The Jupiter cycle starts halfway through the year. So by the time it crosses 0 degrees, it's approaching, the 60% of the cycle, the 216 degree of the cycle, okay? The third 72 degree movement. And so here we go. We're going to plot from October 1st, which we know that's the position of the sun on the day of natal Jupiter, or on the degree of natal Jupiter, but that's the day of the sun, 187 degrees, October 1st, September 30th, October 1st. So let's take a horizontal line, or actually let's take a box instead. And let's just take a box, a Gann box, standard Gann box, plot it to $0, and plot it to $0, and we're going to put it on October 1st. Okay, any October 1st. We're going to repeat it, so it doesn't matter. We want to put it to October 1st, pull it up to 360 degrees, pull it over to the next October 1st. So this is one full solar natal Jupiter cycle. In a sense, the point in time, sorry, let me just plot this. Here we go. So I'll just make it perfect. I'll enter it 0, 360. And let's take a look at the dates. We've got September 30, October 1st, there we go to begin with, and then we're almost there, October 1st, okay. So here we go. Now, if you take a look at my box, you'll notice the divisions in time are 20%, 40%, 50%, 60, 80, and 1. Now, the 50% is just to mark the middle of the box, the middle of the cycle to me, okay? I like to know where the opposition is. That's technically 180 degrees of this full cycle. So if you take a look up at my chart on my circle, you'll see 20, 40, 60, 80, and again 0. So 0, that's the natal position of Jupiter. And then we pull up over here to 20%, and we get up to about, well, the 12th, 13th of December. You'll see 20%, the 12th or 13th of December. Okay. So these aren't your standard proportions that you would normally break your boxes down into. The people, the default settings of boxes can be changed, remember that. But also, realize these default settings were created for, they're the more the average, the most used settings, let's say, for some reason. But when we're using this particular system, we're using these boxes not to divide them into our standard divisions, but into sort of these astrological divisions, these sacred geometry divisions. Okay, if we were dealing with something different than a 72-degree harmonic or aspect or transit, we're going to be doing a different percentage here. Okay. An easy example would be the 90 degrees would obviously be the quarters of the box, so it would just be 25%, 50%, 75%, and then 0. Right. So these are our quintile positions, and again, just that middle point, that 50%, that 180 degrees. So 180 degrees would be exactly across here, somewhere across here. Now, let's take this. We've also got these positions of percentage for price. Because, again, we need to know not only the position of, how can I explain this? So we've gotten our percentages of 20%, 40%, 60%, and 80%. Remember, those are relative. Those are relative to natal Jupiter's position. But now we're going to be relating natal Jupiter's position to the hard 0 to 360 degrees of price, okay, which doesn't have a relative starting position for us, okay? We want to see 0 degrees and 360 degrees, and we want to know when the next level begins, okay? That 0 degrees is commonly a very important moment for us, okay? So we want to know where those moments are. So we've got to keep our box set within those standard settings. So now we need to know what is the percentage of each of one of these positions within a box between 0 to 360 degrees. So we're just taking our position 187 degrees and dividing it by 360, that's 51%. That means within this box that you see here, the price of 51% is literally natal Jupiter, always. So if maybe I can make it thicker, maybe not, no. Maybe I could just, the actual position, make it a different color, price. Anyways, I don't wanna mess with it too much, okay. But you know that that middle position is the natal position of Jupiter. 72 degrees from there is 72 degrees from natal Jupiter is 259 degrees, and that's 71% of this box, okay? So let's punch in our numbers. We've got all our numbers punched in. Hopefully that wasn't too simplistic and you didn't see me punching in all these numbers. I mean, basically you're just entering them as coordinates here inside of your, or not quite, the levels of your boxes, okay? And the coordinates again are just set to your standard spots. So dates, October 1st to October 1st, splitting that year up into proportion of 5, right? Splitting it into 5. And then plotting price as it relates to the actual position of natal Jupiter on this 360 degree circle. Now, hopefully that makes sense, okay? Because it's sort of at the core of all of this. Because if I take this now, this box, and I just copy it and paste it, right click, or sorry, how did I do that? I hit Control, and then I just grabbed it and dragged it. And if I hit Shift, it'll keep it within that same line. I pull it up here. Okay, now I've got my double stack of natal Jupiter. And you know, so this is now the position of natal Jupiter on this second level of 360 degrees. Okay, so the position of natal Jupiter for Apple in price at $1 per degree is basically $187, which, well, is that what we're getting? We're getting about 183, well, 50, it was about 52%, right? Maybe I should put that, 52%. Maybe all these percentages are off by a couple of decimals, you know, it's when you're dealing with this stuff, try to be as accurate as you can, but also realize, I mean, what happened there? 51 is still there. Oh, I've got a separate box, I see. Sorry, let me clarify everything here. So 51 degrees, I'm just gonna keep it at 51, but you realize, you know, 51, 52, about 183 to 187 bucks. Okay, tiny little range. Okay, so you can take this now, and every year there is technically a solar natal Jupiter return. The Sun returns to the position of natal Jupiter once a year. So let's copy these, hitting shift and grabbing everything I need, and then dragging it over, hitting control and shift at the same time, giving me two perfect boxes connected. And let's keep it at 51. I don't know why that changed on me. Okay. So first of all, to note something interesting, the fact that this whole market kind of sits within these two ranges of 360 degrees of natal Jupiter. Yeah, it just moved into there. But remember, the market only kind of started moving at this higher rate at this $1 per degree. We could tell by the fact that this market is so flat in comparison. Of course, we would zoom right in, okay? And we might use a much smaller scale than $1 per degree. So we would probably see, just like most markets, they'll commonly find a lot of support and resistance between two levels of 360 degrees of a natal planet, like 360 degrees of natal Jupiter is way up here. One full cycle of price of 360 degrees or $360. It's just the next level up. And the price will commonly sit between both these lines and, find a lot of middle resistance at that 0 degree mark. Okay. So what's happening here now with the sun? Why did we plot the sun? Well, we want to see the sun's position passing through natal Jupiter's positions. And as it passes through, we make something called a natal transit, right? So basically, as the sun moves from 187 degrees, so let's go to that date. We know that that is the date right here. The first, this 187 degrees is the 1st of October. Okay, so let's just take a look at that. So the sun is there on that day. Now, the idea obviously would be, in best case scenario, on this very day, the price that's being called is literally the sun crossing this particular point. Now, that kind of concept is maybe foreign to you, but that is the idea that we look for through all of this. We're trying to find a reason why the price might be associated to these levels. And well, the way that we do that is we basically watch for planets to make associations of some sort or some special relationship on the circle. And then we look for the price to literally be at that position. Now, it doesn't always happen perfectly. Fluctuations of markets volume, things change, the ratio fluctuates. But at its most simplistic, we can look at this chart and assume that as the sun crosses through 51%, or as it crosses over this level here, remember we plotted this, it's a little bit wonky maybe to trading days, the plotting of the degrees of the sun. So let's maybe get a little more perfect. We've got here maybe March 25th. See, there's a little bit funny, March 21st till March 21st. So basically looking for an exact connection of the sun at each one of these exact angles. The sun should be crossing 51 degrees here, or about 52 degrees on this day. The sun will be crossing here just over, just about 71 degrees on here on this day, on the same as these spots here on the circle, just like we've got it. Okay, sun crossing December 11th, or the day being December 11th. The day being December 11th, we're looking for the price to be relatable to the position of the sun crossing through the structure. Now, let's look over here, because immediately you see, as soon as the market fluctuates harder and it starts moving faster, and you can see it's actually catching the angular sort of support and resistance of the sun there. Well, that's a sign to you, first of all, that in the simplest of way, the market's moving at this speed now, $1 per degree. So immediately it's catching the geometry of this planetary geometry, basically. Let's get this a little more aligned here. It should look like this, essentially. You should be able to see your crossing of your sun at 51, okay? It starts at 0 degrees of the year, crosses on this day 51 degrees, or sorry, 51% or 187 degrees of this 360-degree price cycle. So I hope you realize, we're just drawing the circle, right? We're just drawing whatever's on the circle. That's really important. I mean, most GAN tools, when you get to the square of 9, the square of the wheel of 24, that was heavily, we did a webinar on that. It's just heavily reliant on drawing what's on the wheel onto the screen and then using the logic of the planets telling us something about time and price. Like, oh, the sun is crossing on the day of a particular 72-degree transit of the sun to natal Jupiter's positions, that the price should be at this particular price at this particular time. And there it is. And we come up here, we find a similar situation. So we're looking for at, let's see, 0.4 of the year. Let's see here. Let's make a little more sense of this. Here's our beginning of our cycle in this year on about October 21st. Sorry, October 1st. Okay, well, these things, again, it's a little bit tough with the trading days. The percentages of this is being split across. You'll see that when we bring this into Optima, it's a little bit more precise because it's actually drawing the precise planetary positions. Okay. But once you have this sort of grid pattern set up, okay, so here we have our second cycle beginning here. Right? That's our second year that we've drawn. I mean, this is many years into Apple, but this is the first year that we drew, and this is our second year beginning here. So this is this position of the year, 187 degrees, and that is 51% of the year. So this is the point that the price is being called at here. And again, it's not exactly there. And it does, first of all, in some way tell you, okay, well, if it's not quite there and the market starts moving away from there, well, that's a bullish signal in a sense. But also, again, until we get to this point in time, the market's not quite moving with this geometry in full yet. Okay, I'm going to show you the half geometry. You're going to see more relationships to this. But as we get into this higher up geometry, this position up here, basically, let's see here, this is a cycle beginning. This is our second. This is our 20%. This is our 40%. So our 40% of this Jupiter cycle, right, which is 144 degrees of the cycle, our biquintile transit. That's what it's called. This is 91% of 360 degrees. And so the price of 91% is up here on this day when it's crossing the time of 0.4. So if we zoom right in, you can see it's not exact. As a matter of fact, what happened? The price actually at this point fell and found support exactly 72 degrees below. Okay, it actually fell from 144 degrees to 72 degrees, from 91% to 71%, 91 to 71. You can see the percentages there. So hopefully you're seeing something very special here. These numbers that I'm pulling off of this chart, other than it being related to a date related to Apple, has nothing to do with the price. The arbitrary connection of $1 per degree is, well, I mean, quite arbitrary in my opinion. And then laying these lines and finding these kinds of connections, not only the support and resistance and the general feel of the market you can see being defined by the angles, etc., but also directly finding what we would call a square out, a price square out, where the price, especially within 2 or 3 days, is basically at the price and time of a transit. The price being the percentage of 360 degrees, or $360 in this case at $1 per degree, 91%. Now, if the price was up here and it was up in the $700 range, we would expect the price to move to this level of price at 91 degree or 91% of the 360 degrees. So it is about position of the market as well, right? We need to say to ourselves here, there's something realistic to ourselves here we need to say. Remember, if we're making some form of prediction well into the future, well, why didn't it end up here? Why did it end up here? Why couldn't we have said, okay, it should have been at 91%. Why couldn't it be at $685? Well, there's lots of different reasons. That's all I can say for now. We'll look into the square of 9 for help with that kind of information. Okay. So once we have this idea of drawing planets, well, we can kind of do this many different ways. You know, we can draw planets like the other planets all over here, or we could take planetary averages. There's all kinds of information. It's very simplistic. And you use this circle, you know, for any kind of plotting. If you plotted natal Mars, then you'd be looking for the sun's relationship to natal Mars, and then you'd be looking Mars also, you know, the position of Mars in relation to natal Jupiter, or the position of natal Jupiter, or transiting Jupiter itself into natal Jupiter. So let's take a look at that now. Okay. So, oh, actually, I was going to promise you a look back here a little bit more at this lower geometry. So just a little bit further before I jump into that next level of understanding, you know, another transit. Just before that, remember, this is set to $1 per degree. I saved that other stuff that you'd see me. Let's save this stuff here that we've got on the screen as its own layer, and we'll call it $1. And now I could kind of move between the two, and we can see the two. So you'll notice one thing first up front is that there's more detail on the 50 cent. I also added the 72-degree harmonics of the sun on the 50 cent chart. So let's take a look at that. Could just turn the $1 off and pop on the 50 cent. Let's look at them together. It's going to be super complex, but I think you can realize, you know, this angular relationship you see between the steeper, thick yellow line and then this line here. You know, basically that this line is moving at half the speed. It's moving up in price at half the rate that this thicker yellow line is. Basically, one's moving at $1 per degree, and the other one's moving at 50 cents per degree. Okay, and I'll show you really easily how you can tell. The sun, the thick line here, is crossing 0 degrees on March 21st, and then it's crossing 0 degrees at the next level at $180. So at half the rate. So it's moving at half the speed of the price. And so our stacked prices are much more condensed. But if we look back in time, we might be able to see a little better information related to these same kinds of things. So let's look here. On the day of this transit here, as it fell into, we actually looked at this one already. Actually, let's just take a look at this first one again at $1 per degree. Okay, so on this day at $1 per degree, during this big period, we might have had definitely had a moment in time when the market was moving at this higher rate. Might have been one of the first times actually when it happened. Okay, and this was a sun conjuncting natal position of Jupiter, right? That's the sun passing October 1st in the sky, in a sense. So on that day, we're expecting the market to be at this 50% line. Basically, 2 or 3 days later, the market jets downwards, finds a little bit of support on the sun there, and falls to 51%, gets a gap. Okay, that's a sign to me that this worked in a sense. This astrological need for the price to be a magnet to this level, it worked. But once we start moving inward, we know that we had some disconnect, and these flatter parts of the market, it wasn't working. So let's take a look at our 50 cents. So we get to our 20% of the year, 72 degrees. We should be at 71, right? Whoops. Let's pull this back. Okay. So you've got here 71% in price, 71% in price. That's what we're looking for. So as the market's falling down here, we're looking for the price on the day of 0.2, as in 20% of the year. Oh, sorry, 20% of our solar year against the natal position of Jupiter, right? So 20% from that October 1st cycle, 20% of the natal Jupiter cycle, we'll call it. Okay. So 20%, we're looking for the price to be at 71%. And it does get very bearish. It falls, finds support where? On the sun. By the time this price fell to this level, the sun had moved here and the price found support on it. That's how you're going to look at something like that. You're bearish at this moment because the price is out of balance. It needs to be at 71%. It's at 91%. It's 72 degrees away from where it should be. Now we're going to expect the market to move 72 degrees back towards 71%, which is, 259 degrees of the circle. And really it's 72 degrees away from natal Jupiter's price. So we're looking for a movement towards 71%. Where does it find support? On the sun, in a sense, that price range has moved. The need for the price to be there has moved. Yeah, we could have hoped that it went a little further if we were short, but if we have some sort of trading system in place, it should still be able to be profitable if it falls and we don't find that absolute low, but we turn a little bit earlier while you have the warning system of the sun there. Okay. And now we move up to the next one here, this 0.4, right? This is the next period of time when the sun crosses this position here, this 91% of the 360-degree cycle. So it's 91% of price. And we're looking for connection to 40% of the cycle. And of course, that's the price we're looking for that day. Kind of found it a little bit off, but you realize it's there before you've gotten there. So if your target on the day of 71% was down here at 71%, your next target is up here at 91%. And yeah, you didn't catch the highs and lows perfectly on this geometry. And there's many reasons, but in the simplest of ways, you've had a change, moved towards this market, towards the bottom here. It didn't quite make it, found support on the sun and moved up towards the next target. And you hit your target before you got there. So you've profited. You might be even in long with a trading stop. So how you trade this, it's definitely going to affect things. Yes, WD Gann could take a chart like this and find an exact moment in time and price when he might find a high. There are ways to do that. But, this way that we're working right now is a simplistic approach. And we're not bending these lines in any way to the market to help us find the exact number that the price might turn on. But knowing that we're going to get quite a few moments when the actual price turns right where it should, or it is right where it should be, well, in some sense, that's good enough for this kind of chart. Okay, we'll take it a little further. But what I'm trying to get at here also is, this cycle, it's pretty good. This is one you'd want to look at for everything. Yes, I did say look at Mars and Jupiter, but also look at the sun with Jupiter. The sun is one of those other amplification kind of planets. It kind of helps bring out all of the great qualities of Jupiter, let's say, if you look at it from an astrological perspective. So the fact that Jupiter and the sun are playing very nicely together here for us in price is very important. But also try another planet. Let's just look through a little bit further here. We're looking for, that position of 51% at 0 degrees of the Jupiter cycle. Here you are, well out of balance, and the market jets up And by the time the next transit comes around, it's there. So it took 72 degrees of time of the sun to reach its 72-degree target. Almost perfectly, right? And then once you get into this area, you can see that the market kind of fluctuates well beyond. It just blasts through these sun lines and no longer stays within this channel. And that's a sign to immediately, one, okay, sure, it's going to be blasting through a channel. It's going to find maybe some resistance up in the next channel. Maybe it's moving up to another level of 360 degrees and it's going to start playing out this system of finding exact square outs at the exact price at the exact time at a higher level. But also knowing that it's blasting through these lines at double the speed, essentially, we could actually just throw down instead, of course, our $1 per degree lines. And we could just look at it from that other perspective. It's like we've grown our geometry to the market's new speed. How do we know to do that? Commonly, I would look for something like this. If volume has a huge influx, literally doubling, well, if our geometry is 50 cents and the volume doubles, well, then maybe we should move up to $1 per degree, which is double the volume, double the ratio. So double the volume, double the ratio. Let's take a look at the volume just real quick. We're not going to concentrate on volume today. I just want here's some indicators. Volume. I don't know what I have here. Let's just search for the standard volume. There we go. By default, it comes up usually. I think I deleted it at the beginning. I like to set it in its own frame. So I move to my visual order here. The move to, and I go to a new pane above. I like to see the volume above. It's just a habit of mine. Okay, and just without trying too hard with this, just going to say, okay, well, over here, let's throw on a moving average so we could get a cleaner perspective. It's half a moving average of 20 gives us a real smooth line. Okay, doesn't really deviate too far from the general, that baseline that you can see there, the volume makes, but it sort of avoids all of the spikes. Okay, and it only really spikes up when it really counts. And if we were to look at the horizontal levels here, let's just take our horizontal level. If I put it here to sort of this average level that it was sitting at here. Okay, well, you've got it here, maybe about 30 million. Let's just put it to the hard 30. Oops, 30 million. This is just the most basic form of volume analysis that you can do. And, putting it up, putting it up to 60 million shows you the double amount. And of course, the market basically tapped it and fell back down. So to say in the simplest of ways that the market doubled in speed, doubled in ratio, it doubled in geometry, well, it doubled in volume in the sense that the market moved much quicker at this time than it did any other time in history. You might look back and find that it was a big move compared to any other time, especially on even the higher time frames. But also remember that stocks do splits, so volume information becomes interesting later on. There would be other things you would have to do, and there's lots of volume analysis that we can take care of at more advanced levels. But just knowing that this jump happened, you jump in volume, you jump in ratio by double, and you get better square outs again. Okay, try this stuff out. It's really handy. I really like plotting this stuff in simplistic charting software. Okay. Just got a little comment there. Thanks, Mish. Thank you very much. I'm going to move on to plotting Jupiter here. Okay, so now I'm going to just pull up a weekly chart. I'm just going to pull up another frame. I'll save it. Okay, if I move this to a weekly, well, 2 time frames, and I'm going to get rid of the sun stuff. You don't need the sun in this case because we're going to be dealing with Jupiter now. I'm not going to really draw Jupiter's position because Jupiter has the retrograde cycle, and the retrograde cycle creates some irregularities within the line. I'm going to show you an example in Optima before we finish today. Okay. So let me just delete this stuff here. There's my little toolbar. There it is. Now I'm going to keep this box up because remember, these proportions, they're still valid, right? And we don't want these March 21st anymore because they don't help us. It's only for the sun. But these proportions of 20%, 40%, 60%, those are the proper proportions of our fifths of our circle. So even if we're going to be plotting Jupiter cycle, well, we need to plot these as well, right? It's just going to be a different cycle. It's going to be a different length. These boxes will now be different sizes in time, but in price, they're going to remain the same. Let me just click here, select this, I'll delete these, and let's set up our Jupiter cycle. Now, we're going to have to go back to our ephemeris. Move this. Now, what we're going to look for is this. We've got a weekly chart. That's good for Jupiter, okay? Because, yeah, the daily chart and the sun, that makes sense, right? 1 degree per day, the sun, the geometry works with the daily chart. We start working with the geometry of Jupiter or the longer term planets, I would say switch over to a weekly, or with sorry, when I say longer term, I mean the planets with the longest cycles, the outer planets. Use them on a weekly chart, use them on a monthly chart, okay? The volume analysis that I bring in later will show you that, in some way those are more appropriate for the ratio that those planets work with. Okay? Usually, yeah, I mean, you can say it. I mean, even though it doesn't seem, what I'm telling you here is that, there's a direct conversion of price and time, etc. But yeah, technically, the different planets are going to work at different ratios because they happen at different speeds, and the amount of speed a market takes over longer periods of time, or the height of the amount of the, let's say, the ultimate highest speed that the market makes over time, it's going to be what I want to say is basically that the highest highs and the lowest lows are going to be associated to the bigger time frames. Just like that, we can imagine that the biggest planetary cycles, the longest planetary cycles, are going to create the biggest movements, and therefore they need to be seen on a longer term chart in order to get the proper information into the settings, right? But for the simplest stuff that we're doing right now, we don't have to worry about that too much, okay? But I want to prepare you for the fact that you're going to pull this home, you're going to start doing it, and it's not going to work immediately. $1 per degree is not going to work for every market, no question. 50 cents, 20 cents, 1 cent per degree, 100 cents per degree, or a hundredth of a cent per degree, or also $100 per degree. These things all play out on different markets. We'll have to take that into a whole new realm of understanding. But, in the simplest of ways, we could work with this. $1 per degree being pretty appropriate for Apple, but really only recently, probably 50 cents per degree being more appropriate over longer periods of time into the past, and even less back into the past even further. Yeah, definitely something like price level does kind of associate to ratio, in the sense that something like that trades at $360, trading at $1 per degree, that's pretty logical, right? But it doesn't always trade at $1 per degree at $360. But it probably doesn't also travel at such a tiny rate, right? Like it wouldn't be at a hundredth of a cent or a thousandth of a cent per degree if the market was at $360. Okay, so there is a relativeness there in a sense. The level that the price is normally at does kind of affect ratio, but it's not the be all end all. It's not the reason why ratio is a particular one. It might give us the range that the ratio sits within, that's for sure. So I'm just going to take another one here. I'm going to pop $180 because I want to work with 50 cents per degree moving back with something that's going to go so far back in time. In a sense, we should probably even work with something less, but let's just try something like 50 cents per degree. Take our block here. Go to 180 as well. We'll delete that. Now, pull up our ephemeris, and there's an option here to search monthly. Oh, okay. Here we go. Where is it? Took me. Huh. Aspects in transit, natal transit search, ephemeris search engine. There we go. From that other page, there was an actual quick search as well. Okay. I just clicked away by accident first. So basically, in this chart, what we're going to do, we're going to look for every time Jupiter is at 19 degrees Sagittarius. Unfortunately, I can't just punch in, 259 degrees in here. That's the way I like to work. When I'm working in Gann Trader and Optima, that's what I'm doing. Can we predict a change of ratio from 0.5 to $1 per degree when I think, yeah, definitely if you are anticipating big moves, the actual system to this becomes basically preparing for multiple ratios. And I hope that makes sense. In a sense, what you're doing is there are ways to predict how the market will fluctuate. When cycles all come together, markets fluctuate heavily. You might see drastic changes in ratio when there's just drastic changes in volume. And when cycles all come together, there's often changes in volume. So, when there's many planetary cycles coming together, there becomes a point in time when when volume gets heavy, definitely you're going to want to immediately jump and start trying different ratios. So when you are experimenting with this stuff, if you can handle the math of that, it's pretty simplistic. Try $2 per degree on your market. Try $4 per degree. Try $10 per degree if you're up in a market over $1,000. Try $20 per degree. If you work with Bitcoin, we'll work with a couple more things like this in Optima because it's a little easier to switch around. But you're going to have to do this kind of stuff in TradingView manually. So sticking with something simplistic as an example is a little easier. Let's get right into this now. So we've got Jupiter. What we want to know is, yes, natal Jupiter was 187 degrees. Now we want to know every time Jupiter, well, actually, we want to know when Jupiter hits 187 degrees first, okay? That's actually more important. I don't know why I jumped there. So we need to know, first of all, not only was it at 187 degrees on 12/12/1980, natal Jupiter, then every 12 years returns to 187 degrees. So let's look at Jupiter. Every time it moves to 19 degrees Sagittarius. You see how it gives you ranges? I mean, that's kind of good because a lot of time you're working with ranges of time and not exactness, especially with something like a longer term cycle, slower planets. Okay. And we're looking for Sagittarius, 19 degrees Sagittarius, and we don't care if it's direct or retrograde. We want to see it both ways. Okay, that's all we're doing. We're just searching for the time that Jupiter is again at natal Jupiter's position. And maybe we'll only look for the times between 1980 and maybe until 2030. We don't need too much information. And then, bam, we've got that information for ourselves. Okay. Now you'll see that if we look here, it's crossing many days here where, okay, 1983, it's hitting that degree. And then in 1995, it's hitting that degree. And then in 2007, it's at that degree for a very long time. Okay. From March 15th, we've got Jupiter at 19 degrees Sagittarius. All the way here, we've got the last day here. We still got Jupiter just not quite through. And why is that? Well, Jupiter is retrograde. And when Jupiter is retrograde, it basically stops and moves backwards in the sky. So its actual planetary position moves from 19 degrees back to 18, back to 17, and turns back around and goes up. And you could look at videos of the astronomy, let's call it, or the effects of retrograde cycles. Okay. How do we convert 187 degrees to 7 degrees Libra? Well, take a look at the actual ephemeris that you see in front of you, this circle, right? It's doing the conversion for you, okay? And I'm going to give you this circle, a blank circle that you could use. It's also available in different types of software, obviously, if you have a astrological ephemeris, but 187 degrees, check it out. It is 7 degrees Libra. You can see here, this is Libra. Each division of the circle here is 30 degrees because each sign is 30 degrees in length, let's say, okay? And so 30 degrees here is from 180 degrees at this point, right? So that's 0, 30, 60, 90, 120, 150, 180. And then it's 7 degrees from 180. Well, 180 degrees is also the beginning of this section here. This section of 30 degrees of the circle is Libra. There you go. And yeah, thanks. Thanks for the questions. Don't hold them back for sure. Definitely. That's stuff that I might have skipped over it and somebody might not know what I'm talking about. Okay. So 187 degrees, 7 degrees Libra. And this is, you know, that's why this is a special ephemeris in a sense. It's a calculator. It's a gang calculator for you. It calculates between all of these translations in a sense, their degrees, their planetary degrees, their percentages, their dates. They are astrological positions with a sign. Okay. It's all of these things. And you need all of these if you're going to plot them manually. So 187 degrees. It's at that position for a very long time when it's retrograde. Take a look at a video. What are retrograde cycles? What is a retrograde planet? It will show you. It's an illusory thing. It's based on the fact that we're looking at the planets from the Earth. When the Earth goes around the sun, it creates an optical illusion with the planets that are far away, or well, all the planets are far away from Earth technically. When it sees the planet, when you see the planet in the distance, and it's moving around the sun, sometimes there's a point in time when there's an optical illusion where it looks like the actual planet moves backwards. And from a geocentric position, we actually chart that as a planet moving backwards in the sky and then moving forwards. It would literally look like this. Look at my cursor going around the circle, and then it goes retrograde. Jupiter sort of stops along the ephemeris, moves backwards, and then moves forward again. And I'll show you that in Optima, a real example of that. Okay. But again, if that's something that doesn't make sense to you, it's a basic astrological effect. You just need to understand what it is, but it's just a timing thing. And what it means is that we're going to see a repeat of whatever degree natal Jupiter is at, or sorry, whatever degree Jupiter is at. In this case, when it goes retrograde, it's going to repeat that angle quite a bit. Okay, look, we can see that it's at that angle in 2007, all through March, all through April. It's just sitting on natal Jupiter in 2007. Let's take a look at that date, actually. Okay, it hits it again in October when, let's see here, yeah, natal Jupiter at 19 degrees Sagittarius. So when it goes direct again, okay, and comes back around, it hits that 19 again. And that 19 degrees is shown here in October again. Okay. So let's take a look at just quickly that period of time. I'm just curious. Okay. 2007. Autumn. We have return in April, right? This is where we have our March dates beginning back at the beginning of March, 2007, 2015. Sorry, 2007, March 15th, 2007 is where we begin. So basically around this low that came in after this, basically what was the all-time high, you get your conjunction. The conjunction happens and sticks around until, you know, the end of April. April 28th is basically here at the high, let's say, especially on a weekly. Okay, and we get a fall. And then in October is when the conjunction happens again. October, being right there. October, right there. Look at that. Beyond that point, there's your bullish call, your new Jupiter cycle beginning in 2007, and basically starting a new bull trend. And that's what you're looking for with Jupiter returns, okay? So let's plot that date. Okay, so let's plot the last date here, which is November 2nd. It can become a choice for you. It's October 30th, November 6th, the weekly chart, remember? Okay, so that's our first date. That's our conjunction in the past that we're going to plot. And our next conjunction happened in, when was it? 2019. And again, because of the retrograde cycle, we're getting a few different dates in 2019 when it happened. Let's look back and see. Oh, the last date. Okay, good. So October 12th was the last date. So if we go into the future here, pull our yellow line into the future, and we have October 12th, 19. That might be, oh, October 14th. There, that's the closest day we get. And lo and behold, well, another bullish cycle beginning. And yeah, it fell there, and we did break the low, which is kind of uncommon. The idea would be that this is a brand new bullish cycle, but this is also, you know, that kind of market where a lot of people are aware of these kinds of things and they're trading them. And we also had that gigantic ratio change where relationships of price levels start to change. So, you know, there's something going on here that there's always more to analyze than just the geometry of the planets, but this is a good place to begin, you could tell. So let's get our dates right on our box. Set our box to a weekly box of beginning right there, or ending right there, I suppose. Beginning right there. Now, okay. Now, generally, I just wanted to point out here, I know it's not going to be perfect, but we've got, you know, 4 weeks per month, 4 times 12, right? You know, you end up with this irregular 52 weeks and 48, you know, the amount of days in a year, the amount of days in a month, they're all irregular. But what we want to know is that this amount of time, generally, it's just a special number, okay? The Jupiter cycle is not just the Jupiter cycle, let's say. Of course, it's just the Jupiter cycle. It's Jupiter moving 360 degrees from a particular point in time. Again, we said this was the point in time related to the birth of Apple, right? We can move this back in time, but you can see obviously back in time, the market's moving at a slower, lower ratio. And we would have to zoom right in. Maybe we create 10 cents per degree and go up to $36 being 360 degrees, right? And then you can see that until the market breaks $36, you kind of stuck down there for a while. Again, it's not really like a, whoops. What happened there? Wow. What on earth could have happened there? Oh, am I looking at the wrong dates here? Okay, guys, let's plot this again. Sorry, let's just start over. I don't know what happened there. I lost a lot there, and my undo is not working, as you can see. Ugh. Guys, I'm losing control. Sorry about that. Okay. I'm not sure what happened there. Sorry about that. Let's just start over. The joy of technology. 180. What on earth? Okay, well, you know, hey guys, save your work. Okay, came back to me. Well, that's handy. Okay. Did I 2006, not 2007? You are right. Okay, that is right. Let's correct my mistake here. That is totally right. November 2nd. Oh, guys. Look at me messing up in front of you guys. 2007. November 2007. Okay, well, a major high, an all-time high. Well, you know, and then afterwards, looking for 30 degrees of Jupiter, or even 72 degrees of Jupiter, which would give us a trigger. Let's pull this up here. Oh, a little far. We're a little rattled by all what happened there. I'll get myself back together. 180. And November 5th. That's close enough. Okay. There we go. All right. So not as perfect in that case. We got a high on the actual conjunction. But again, this is a long-term cycle. And I was actually going to bring up the fact that it is a 12-year cycle, and 12-year cycles, well, those are 144 months. Okay, and if you've heard of 144 months, the square of 144, well, that's somewhat, you know, fractally related to the position of Jupiter, crossing the entire ephemeris. Sorry about that, guys. Just had a little spill here. Everything's kind of going wrong at the same time here, as usual, but we'll get there. So then you got this October date, October 14th. So that's our full Jupiter cycle set at 50 cents per degree. And I'm sure immediately you're seeing quite a connection to the levels of the quintile positions of price over a long period of time at 50 cents. And also what we're going to do, we're going to look for basically the idea that, you know, Jupiter is passing through this portion of price, right? It's just like the sun was moving from 0 degrees to 360 degrees, so is Jupiter. So let's take a look at our blank ephemeris. Sorry, at our ephemeris here. Okay. And when we get to 20%, we're looking for a connection of price, right, to way up high at 71% of price. So, you know, when you're down here and there's this flat connection previous to this time, we might be dealing with some lower ratio movements. So let's just move up. And we are seeing, first of all, you know, this connection to these levels, but we aren't getting the actual square outs that we were looking for, in the sense that, you know, we're looking for, this is set to the length of time when Jupiter crossed this degree here for the first time. And so let's get a good picture here of when Jupiter crossed 0 degrees last, okay? Or let's plot when Jupiter also is at 0 degrees, just like we did with Mars. So let's pull up our ephemeris. So 0 degrees Aries. It's going to help us plot Jupiter to price. And we're not doing an exact replica of Jupiter, but from 07 here, we have Jupiter crossing 0 degrees here in 1999, and then again in 2010. So if we go back here, we set our horizontal line, vertical line. Where's my vertical line? There we go. My vertical line to Let's pull this last date in 1999, February 17th. 1999. Nobody ever said this would be too easy. Plotting is still annoying sometimes. February 17th, so the closest date I've got on a weekly is February 15th, 1999. Got it right this time. Okay, and we have another date of 0 degrees crossing June 6th. Okay, 2010. Let's bring this up here, 2010. All right, June 6th. Oh, that's January. June 6th, just to make sure again. Closest I got is June 7th. Now, if I take my line and I draw it here and up to here, this is Jupiter crossing through the ephemeris. But it's not going to be perfect. You're going to see over time, it's not going to work out with your degrees that you find with Jupiter, because over time, throughout this history, Jupiter moved in an irregular pattern, okay? But against trading weeks, this is a good example of the way that Jupiter looks in the sky and then in price. Let's make it blue. I like Jupiter to be blue. That's my own coloring scheme. And let's take this and drag it here to the next 0 degrees moment. Close enough, right? And let's set our box. Oops. Here. The future as well, why not? And again, this is 50 cents, right? And I'm sure you're seeing a really nice connection there between Jupiter's position. Let's set it to the exact coordinates of $0 to $180, 50 cents per degree. And let's look into the future here. What was that date in the future? Can I plot it? Let's see. May 22nd is the next, beyond this 2011 time, when it comes back around and in its retrograde cycle touches those degrees again. Well, the first time, next time that it's going to have a conjunction is May 11th, 2022. So put that down. May 11, 2022. So 1 year off. May 23rd, 2022. May 15th, maybe 1 week down. Okay, close enough. So that's my next 0 degree date there, and I can just copy and paste that from there. Okay. And basically what you're looking for is the connection between Jupiter crossing the proper position. Let's see here, can we get it? So if Jupiter is at 0 degrees here, well, we're way up here at 71 degrees on the 0 degree date. So it's a bit of a fail there because of the irregularity of the cycle. It's making bends. So now that we've got the understanding of what we're doing, let's move into Optima and actually see the positions of Jupiter, okay? Because if you realize that these are irregular cycles and this line is bending up and down, it's going to reach this position, but it might be at a different position along the way in between. So Optima will actually take the mathematical position of the planet, and without doing it manually, will plot this position of Jupiter exactly as we've done it. So let's jump into it. Whoa. Let's just open a new chart for Apple. Big screen here. And in Optima, I've got tools called the GPL, the GAN planetary line tool. And what I can do, like we said, at 50 cents per degree, 0.5, and we want it to be Jupiter. And we want to see the actual position of Jupiter. So they call it the conjunction line in Optima. That's the 0 degree point of Jupiter, as in the actual position of Jupiter in the sky. Okay. And let's take now, not a GAN box this time, but I've got a tool in Optima that's makes it pretty easy to set up all of our degrees. Let's look at our price degree interval tool. Price degree intervals. Okay, plop it down. And I'm going to set that also again to 50 cents. Now there you go. Now you've got this Jupiter cycle that I was looking up and finding that it was very difficult to, get the exact position of Jupiter and relate it to the exact natal positions of not only the prices, but the time and the price that we got from that circle. Now, what is this? Well, this is 360 degrees of range set up perfectly to 180 degrees, set to 50 cents per degree. So Optima has that ability to just put those levels into there. And we've got our Jupiter line there plotted automatically. The swivels, well, those are the retrograde cycles. We could put a retrograde symbol, RL, planetary retrograde. I'm going to make it, set it to Jupiter. Now, put that block up there, but just ignore that for now. It's back at this time here, right? We were looking at this period here. Well, those are those periods that Jupiter goes retrograde. I'm sure you can see a great connection to some major moves. It is truly something that affects the markets heavily. I did a whole webinar on how to trade with the retrograde cycle. It gets quite advanced. It's not the easiest thing to do, other than to say, yeah, it's great to find a change in trend during the time for Jupiter retrograde. Often a negative time for the markets, at least for a period. But it's also a period of time that often we find double bottoms in markets, things like that. Currently, Jupiter is retrograde. Okay, let's look at that. The retrograde cycle this time, well, I don't think you can say that that was bearish, right? It was basically the beginning of the bullish cycle, the very literal beginning. A change in trend, a breakthrough, but still not bearish, right? Retrograde doesn't mean bearish. That's a common misconception. Okay. But commonly, it does give us that kind of opportunity, at least for a change, let's say. All right. So let's get that same division that we want for our quintile movements of natal Jupiter. What I'm going to do, though, instead of, first of all, let's get rid of the retrograde. Instead of using our GAN box in Optima, again, I just have my natal transit tool, but also I have something called a time by planetary degree tool. I'm just going to use that because, well, we're going to use a mix of the two. I'm going to use my time by planetary degree. All right. This is a tool that's going to count degrees of a planet from a certain point of time. So I'm going to set it to my natal date for Apple of 12/12. 1980. And let's just set it to 9:30 a.m. because that's the beginning of the market. And if you were using the moon in this exact same way, that we'll get to that kind of thing when we use the moon webinars, the time of day becomes much more important. Okay, and in the winter, it is daylight savings time, or not daylight savings time. So you would use GMT5 in New York and GMT4 in summer. Okay. Now we've got Jupiter. And we've got, I don't want to see all of the different degrees. I just want to see it hitting 72 degrees every time, right? We just want to see every quintile aspect every time Jupiter moves 72 degrees around the circle. It's going to hit its natal position from this date every time it moves a full 360 degrees, but also, it's going to move 72 degrees at that rate of Jupiter, but it's going to include the geocentric count, that retrograde cycle in there. So let's see here. First step, I want to see repeat every step. And there we go. Now I've got every 72 degrees of natal Jupiter, okay, in a sense, or every 72 degrees of Jupiter movements since the natal date, since the first trade date. Okay. Now, we want to know also, though, which one is the first one? Which one is the second one? These are all just 72, and we can do some math and figure it out, or I can just use this tool here called the natal transit tool. Throw it down. Now my chart by default shows me the entire Jupiter cycle. We don't need all that, okay? I just want the conjunction. I could see the biquintile and quintile, okay? And I want to see it starting natal date 12, 12, 1980. Right. Same time, 9:30 a.m. Doesn't matter at this point. Okay, so the actual position, you can see that it counts 72 degrees. Oh, is this including? Guys, I might have run into a problem here. Geocentric. Does this not include counts of the geocentric? Heliocentric, geocentric. It's set to geocentric, but I'm not seeing the. Okay, so it's basically just counting 72 degrees of every natal position. Oh. Okay, well, that doesn't really help us. Okay, so I'm going to get rid of this time by the planetary degree. This used to have an option in here to include the retrograde cycle as part of the calculation. I think they might have removed it because it was probably difficult to calculate for them. Yeah, you can look up the Optima recent notes and stuff if you have it. They've been talking about that kind of stuff with their recent upgrades. I think that might have been something I used to use and now it's gone. But that's okay because it doesn't matter. We can just set this up. We basically got, these are actually much more accurate in relationship to then the actual position of Jupiter moving. So at this point in time, you know what this means, that Jupiter is back at its position of 187 degrees, right? If we looked here, I can get my positions of astronomical positions on my cursor. And let's look here. Jupiter conjunction, wait a second, 12, 12, 2000, geez. There we go, guys, 1980. Is that punched in now? Okay, great. Okay, when there is a conjunction, Jupiter should be at 187 degrees, right? So if we look here, there's a conjunction here. When Jupiter here did a conjunction, October 18th, 2016. We look down into the ephemeris date information there, the astro positions, and we look at Jupiter. You can definitely see 186, 187, right? That's what that's marking to you. That's the conjunction. That's when Jupiter has reached 187 degrees. Well, look at it also. Jupiter in price. The actual position of Jupiter is at 187 degrees, 187 degrees of price, which is at 50 cents per degree, just over $90. Okay. Then we've got 72 degrees from there, right up here, this quintile, right? So Jupiter has moved from here to here, 72 degrees. And yeah, we're looking for a relationship between the price that you see on the actual crossing, okay? At the actual crossing of Jupiter, to these actual timings. And is it there every time? No. Why? Because ratio fluctuates. But we can look for relationships like this. If we don't want to fluctuate our ratio too much, we can look for Jupiter's position to be repeated at 72 degrees in the same way that we're, repeating in time 72 degrees. Let's put our quintile Jupiter planetary line. I'm going to just make it stippled so it's a little bit more faint. And if we look here towards these times when the market does fluctuate within those lines and doesn't quite make it all the way to its position here, well, look at that. It's at the next 72-degree position as it enters into this aspect and into this point in time when Jupiter has returned to this position. And so it's found another 72-degree harmonic. And if you look at the next one, well, yeah, in that time, the price jets up towards that price. And basically just before it leaves, it hits that price of the next 72-degree harmonic. And if you move up further, especially during these times when it repeats, you might find that it kind of moves up octave to octave, right? Or harmonic to harmonic. And so you've got 5 Jupiter lines here between, and it literally moves in this period of time, almost basically between 5 Jupiter lines. And each one here, it's here at this price at this time, it's at this price at this time, it's at this price at this time, and jets beyond there. And there's other things going on than just this cycle, but this cycle is really powerful. Let's get some other transits going here. What I want to see also, I don't want to see just the conjunction, which is 0 degrees, the quintile, which is 72 degrees, the biquintile, which is 216 degrees. I also want to, sorry, biquintile, which is 144 degrees. I also want to see a custom angle of 216 degrees. That's that other 72 degree. Sort of not a customary transit. Okay, 216 degrees, you could see it there. Is it labeling it as a biquintile? 216 degrees. Let's see here. There's our next one there. Okay, it was already labeling it, I guess, by saying it's 144 degrees from, yeah, okay, that makes sense. It's 144 degrees from natal Jupiter, in the sense that once you've gotten to this point in time, you know that you're at the second part of the cycle. It's moving back towards 0 degrees. It's 144 from natal Jupiter, 72 degrees from natal Jupiter, and then here it's actually at natal Jupiter's position. Okay, so these divisions you're seeing are just those same, that star. Okay, that star that I would point out onto my circle. Let's get rid of that 216, kind of messes up our chart. So, these are great changes in trend that you're seeing here, obviously, relating to the tops that you're seeing here. You're also seeing them relate to the price of Jupiter at 50 cents per degree. Here's your 2007 high coming in here on the quintile. This is, a quintile Jupiter planetary line. So not quite at the actual position of Jupiter, but finding a relationship directly with, a 72-degree harmonic of Jupiter and finding a major high relatable to that price. And I mean, obviously over here, we didn't get that same connection, but let's just see, since we're in Optima, we can pop these things down easily down to 20 cents per degree. Let's see, 20 cents per degree. 0.2. Okay. And so that would be this level here, and not even that working out. But I would say that right here, the market's barely moving. Market's very flat, and we could even see what 10 cents per degree. It might have been one of the first times here that the market ever began moving at anything over 10 cents per degree. And as you can see, we get a perfect square out on the Jupiter line at those moments there. And when it moves up here, it's obviously moving at a new ratio, but I mean, it does actually fall perfectly and find a support here on a quintile Jupiter line. It doesn't make it all the way up to this, this line up here. Well, let's look at what it was at 20 cents. Where was it? Well, look at that. As it's getting up here into that higher ratio level of planetary lines and higher volume, higher movements of price, new ranges that have never been hit before. Well, that's when it jumps in ratio and we get a square out on a planetary line at the same harmonic again, you know. Now, I'm concentrating a lot on Jupiter here and on Apple. It's going to work on everything. Let's pull up a bunch of other charts. Let's look at just the Jupiter cycle, just the conjunction, where it begins. But I would say that if you look into the past, just from before I just move away from this chart, look for conjunctions to be beginnings of new long-term bullish trends. And look for quintiles, the actual 72 degree harmonic. This one here, the one from our chart. Let's pull that up there. This one right here. Look for this one to be a trigger for large movements. Yes, that's happening there. But if you trade crypto, look back and see when your favorite altcoin or your favorite major crypto coin took one of its first moves and made a first attempt at new all-time highs. Or when did it find a crashing low, maybe an all-time high that then crashed down? You know, this Jupiter quintile, you're going to find this transit being extremely important. And if you're a classical astrologer, you're going to realize, I mean, you don't even focus on quintile aspects. I mean, you might use them for special occasions, I don't know. But I've often heard from astrologers that you don't really even focus on. You focus on trines, you focus on squares. Those are valid too. Those are going to work in the same way that we're working these quintiles. But I think the quintiles are a great place to begin. You might find great buying opportunities or great ending opportunities. Okay. So let's just pull up here quickly before I, basically leave you for the night, because I've laid a lot on you. Tomorrow, we're going to go a little bit more in detail into charts like the ones you see here. I've just got here, though, it's kind of giving me some poor performance because I've got a bunch of charts loaded up here. Ignore that, please. Don't think that you have to be ever looking at a chart like a screen like that. It's quite cool looking, but other than that, let's look here. This is Alphabet, Google. Let's look here. And let's take our chart. These are all set to natal dates. So let's get rid of our planetary lines just for now. And we've just got our natal Jupiter cycle, okay? And if you look here, well, look at our quintiles here ending a previous bull run. Oops. Yes, our square, whoops. Our square ended it with a high. We had our quintiles starting sort of this new movement in towards what would be eventually, sorry, I'll get rid of that. Eventually would be a new bull run, starting at the natal Jupiter conjunction. Okay, and you do those same things. You're going to put down your planetary lines, your natal Jupiter position in its relation to the star that would be related to the natal date of Alphabet. And so you could just have one of those little stars for basically whatever stocks that you trade. You could have a little binder full. You might want to do a couple planets per, you might want to see the same kinds of relationships that you're making with Jupiter here, with Saturn, okay, with Mars, with Jupiter, Mars with Jupiter, Mars with Saturn, the Sun with Jupiter, the Sun with Saturn. And we'll go through more examples like that tomorrow. But I didn't want to get too far today. This is where I want to go. You know, the idea that a Jupiter cycle is our bullish cycle. It's our 144-month-long cycle. It's the one that we can use to figure out when possibly there's a good buying opportunity very long term. We are going to use planetary lines in relation to this position. So if I were to then, let's pull back and just get the actual position of Jupiter up there. We haven't talked about the crisscrossing effect that you're going to see here, but essentially, usually we also plot not just the line of Jupiter, but also the reverse line of Jupiter. You can see that they're plotted both, as in an exact mirror replica of Jupiter's position. It helps us define downtrend movements and find resistances. But just simply, this is the position of Jupiter crossing through this geometry here. We're set here to $1 per degree. I'm sure you're seeing some nice connections here. It's riding with the speed of Jupiter quite a bit. Maybe in this most recent time, you know, Amazon's jumping up to $1,600. Maybe we need to see $2 per degree. Quite that simple, okay? Sometimes within these structures, even when it's moving at $2 per degree, it might drop down to $1 per degree just because the low volume and it's a low point in any cycles. But it should return to that sort of more standard movement, especially if the trend does not break, if the trend continues upwards and historical lows do not get taken out. Notice how the historical lows, they kind of held at this Jupiter line here. Okay. So again, you can plot this. I taught you how to plot this in TradingView. You don't need something like Optima to plot something as simple as, in my opinion, as natal transits, but you need to treat them almost like gold, you know. You need to be treating them in this very specific way, whereas in a piece of software like Optima, I could toss it around, I can throw it, I can try different ratios, I can try different starting dates, I can try multiple natal dates, maybe I try the incorporation date, maybe I try the New York Stock Exchange date of 1792. You know, that's going to work on these stocks too, because these are American stocks, and the American cycles, the long-term American cycles are playing right through these stocks. So even though our Apple stock or our Alphabet stock is playing out at a certain natal date, well, let's take a look at 1792. That's a long time ago, and this is a Jupiter cycle. Again, every 144 months. So I'm going to hit enter. It's going to change the positions of all these things. Take a look here. Take a look at the turns and the position of Jupiter. Again, a natal date from 300 years ago or so, well, 240 years ago, working out to the point where the biggest movement in the market history squares out perfectly to the Jupiter line at $1 per degree. You can't get more simplistic, but also more classic and more GAN than that. It's like the most classic thing that you can imagine. You know, when I see these things happening every day with the moon, you can imagine how I feel that people don't realize these things. I'm sure that when you see these things, you're feeling like, wow, how can we have not known this? And it seems amazing, but we also have to just keep plotting it, just keep popping on the chart. Ignore the fact that maybe it feels overwhelmingly amazing, or maybe you're not seeing the full connection yet and you need to go through and start plotting it a little more. But it's just, you know, the most, let's say, what would you call this? A stereotypical GAN moment. Especially in the biggest moments, they happen all the time. Maybe in between you start to find uncertainty, maybe some imbalance where the volume isn't increasing, but all of the ratios are, because the federal government is doing something interesting to the stock markets, let's say. But these kinds of things will always work out, just like your counts of months, days, years, those kinds of things. If you're into that kind of thing already, they work just as well. You can set up cycles of weeks and months on a circle and find your 72 months and your 72 weeks, and you can do that kind of thing as well with this exact same geometry. If you wanted to put squares, you would find each time Jupiter, in this case, we're looking at the Jupiter cycle. Well, if we wanted to know when Jupiter was going to be square to its natal position, we would just plot every time that it moved 90 degrees rather than 72. We would split this circle up into 4. And it would just look on the chart, you know, you would just have different dates and different, it would be these positions here rather than the purple positions that you see here. So I think I'm going to leave you there today. We could go into a million different examples, but that's been 2 hours. But definitely, if you have any questions now, let me know in the chat and we can talk about them. I can give you your voice. There's no question. If you have some sort of deep question that you'd like to ask. I know that a lot of people had to leave because it's late in different places. Hopefully this was sort of a good enough introduction. We'll get deeper again into these exact same ideas tomorrow, but I didn't want to get too deep, too far. Realize that you could easily plot planetary information on a chart. That's the most important thing here. Yeah, planetary lines are interesting. The sun is really easy to do in other pieces of software, but not beyond the planetary lines. You don't need to know the planetary lines necessarily. Okay, you just need to know, like this is telling us, this ephemeris, when is Jupiter at this, and all the details about that. When is Jupiter? You could stack years of dates. When is Jupiter at 72 degrees each time, and put years and years of dates for yourself, and just keep this here for a master chart for Apple for years. It's really handy. That's how I was doing this before I had any piece of software. It's simplistic. Imagine now that you can use this exact chart. The sun passing through, yeah, you've got that information, but you've also got the points in time when you can see where each planet was at these points. When was Venus at 19 degrees Sagittarius? And what does that tell us about the price and changes? Okay. So give it a try. Plot this stuff out. I'll send you all the information in my email. I'll probably get it by tomorrow morning out to you with the recording. I'll send you all these files. I'll send you the link to the TradingView file so that you can pull it into your TradingView account if you have one. Yeah. Oh, thanks, man. Thanks, Dom. Your work's amazing too, and this kind of stuff, it helps us put this stuff together. It helps us figure out how we can locate hotspots not only in price, not only in time, but also in price. So if you're drawing your Gann boxes already, these are hotspots for when the price should also associate to these levels, not just the parts of the year that were related to the equinox and the Gann dates and the seasonal Gann dates. Yeah, those are important. You might want to see when Jupiter crosses the Gann dates. Also, that's another whole other cycle to see. If you don't know anything about the Gann dates, we'll talk about them a little tomorrow. But yeah, thanks, guys. Any other questions? If you don't have the, I know that was a lot. So once you process the information, thanks, Jess. Once you process the information, just shoot out as many emails as you can to me. I'm going to try to answer everybody's questions quickly. I know I take a lot of time with questions sometimes, but just, I try to make sure I'm not going to give you bad information. I want to make sure you're getting proper information. I don't want to just shoot off an arbitrary answer. So if I take a little time, get in touch with me through Twitter. Okay. Tomorrow, we're going to go a little further with all of this. We're going to talk about how you can use this idea of planetary movement being counted over a certain period of time, but we don't have to necessarily start at natal dates. We could start at highs and lows, things like this. And it's going to sort of be a new version of the same idea, watching the movement of planets and seeing how it squares with price over time. But also, it's going to be a whole other approach. It might be able to get us a little in closer, see closer cycles, and smaller price movements. It's going to get, a little bit more heavily into Optima. So, I had to mention, actually, sorry, that's a good thing. If you had a trial of Optima before and you would like to try it again, I'll get you guys your additional 30 days. I just got to send everybody's information to Optima, and then they're going to send you an ability to start your trial. If you've never had a trial of Optima before, feel free to go over to the website. I'll send you a link, download your free trial, and get started today if you want to. Basically, it gives you 30 days of trying all this stuff out. And you've also got a chance for a 10% discount if you are interested in buying. It's pretty handy. That's totally offered by them. It's nothing to do with me. They just decide to do that for you if you're a part of my webinars, which is pretty nice of them. So I figured I'd let you know again. But yeah, definitely download the trial and definitely use the extra trial, because that's like a valuable thing to have, I think. And you can definitely work out your manual processes. They are handy. Try a square, try a trine where you're dealing with 90 degrees or 120 degrees. Do it manually, but also then get into Optima and try these things with the moon on an hourly chart. Okay, exactly the same stuff. And you're going to find some interesting information that's a lot easier to produce in Optima. But obviously, the process of what Gan did is still here. And I think if you look back into some astro stuff related to Gan, some books, you might see that his handwritten notes, okay, there isn't anything that looks exactly like this, but very much so his sort of, his not only his Gan squares and his circles, but also just when he's using a circle of 360 degrees and writing dates and times. I mean, this is exactly what he's doing. He's plotting out periods in time. And you realize also that if you've got these periods of time pointed out into the future for yourself, these will always be hot spots. So when things pile up at these times, when there's lots of hot spots all together, you know that there's going to be some sort of major thing that occurs. That's what we would call all the cycles coming together. So if you had a square Jupiter coming here, and you had your trine with a different planet, or your quintile with another planet coming in around the same time, well, it would just be more energy, more change, more cycles coming together, more volume probably. So there's so many things to dig into with this, but immediately this simple process of plotting it, using your ephemeris to gather this information, so simple, and plotting basically years in advance turns. You can see, I mean, the turns are incredibly powerful, always. Natal transits are more important, in my opinion, than planetary aspects. And that might be something that we can argue about between astrologers, etc., Gan traders. Okay, but the shape of the market is defined by the natal vibration. You can do this with weeks, months, days, seconds, it doesn't matter. Cycles of these groupings, of these percentages, of these degrees of the circle, well, they're always playing out, they're multiplying, they're dividing the proportions of them when they all come together, like at one of these moments. Well, that's basically a major moment in time for the markets. So far, this low has never been taken out. And that's significant. You might look back and find that that's often the case with a Jupiter conjunction, that the low remains the low for a long period of time and never changes. It never gets broken again. Or if it does, it means it's, a major signal. Look back to the previous. We haven't had, though, with Amazon, we haven't had that many. Or sorry, with Alphabet, with Google. Let's look at Amazon. I know I'm just rambling on and on here, but oh boy, let's get rid of those. Multicolored. There we go. There's our natal dates in relation to Amazon and its Jupiter cycle. Pretty powerful turns there. I'm sure you can see we have a conjunction coming in. To imagine this marks a new bullish signal for something like Amazon, well, it kind of also marks the end of the previous one. And what if we have a lull for a while here? It could be a lull after these conjunctions, or maybe it's just going to continue going on. I mean, this is Amazon we're talking here. But the turn dates are there. The price levels will be associated to the volume. So we'll have all the information we need when we get there. All right, guys, I think I'm going to leave you with that. Thanks very much. I'll get in contact with you tomorrow if you're in anything tomorrow with me, or also into next week, and the week after that will be the remaining summer lectures. Hope everything was clear. Any questions, let me know. All right, guys, thanks a lot. I'm going to end it now. Have a good night.